section 8. Is everyone here? Let me see. I know I heard some shooting behind me before.
Yeah, it's over in that two-story school building.
Yeah, he's back.
That was Cody.
Okay,
I was having some fun.
no worries. I'll get you guys through first section 8 of your manuals. The last 2 pages. As you can see, the theory here is 2 pages, very short. Those with ADF cadet experience or ADF experience will know all of this already. Essentially, we're going to be practicing, or we're going to be studying RATEL right now. RATEL stands for Radio Telecommunications. And what you can see in page 61, on the first table, is the phonetic alphabet. How you pronounce, from letters A to Z, how to pronounce each one of that when you're spelling out letters. Do take note there is a typo. Where there is the phonetic alphabet whiskey, I've put down the pronunciation as India. That is obviously wrong.
What about November? It's spelled
Yeah.
VP.
Also,
Oh,
yeah.
Foxtrot.
Yeah, as you can see, lots of typos that I need to amend. But just ignore that pronunciation column for now. Just focus on the phonetic alphabet itself. So from A to Z, you can see what all of that is. I don't need to go through one by one. But essentially, what you need to use phonetic alphabets for is when you're giving serialized alphabets. So, for example, if I'm in a group alpha, or I'm in the section alpha, I wouldn't say I'm in section A. Obviously, I'll be saying I'm in section alpha. So that's where you use phonetic alphabets. You can also use phonetic alphabets when you're spelling out letters, or spelling out words, like the example banco down there in the page 61. In a radio communication message, I might say, Alpha 1 move to Banco marker. Then I will say, I spell Banco, Bravo, Alpha, November, Quebec, Uniform, Oscar, Banco. And that is for words that are hard to pronounce or hard to understand. That's when you use the spelling method. And the reason why you use, Bravo, Alpha, November, yada, 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 why you use the phonetic alphabets then instead of saying, B, A, N, Q, U, O, is because sometimes over the net, some words may sound similar to other words, some letters may sound similar to other letters, like M and N. Those two sound very similar, but in the phonetic alphabets, they sound very different. For example, Mike and November. So that's how you distinguish letters well over comms. Because comms, especially in real life, comms are, you get a lot of static, a lot of distortion. You need to have that difference in pronunciation between letters to for people to understand better. My own personal technique of studying up or memorizing phonetic alphabets, after I've read them and committed most of them to memory, when I'm driving along the road and I see the rear number plate of the car in front of me, I just practice. I just say, like, if it's SDA, Sierra Delta Alpha. If it's QBZ, it's Quebec Bravo Zulu, that kind of thing. So any opportunity you see a serial number of letters or a serial number of words with letters, just try and practice and say it to yourself. That's my way of practicing. Then of course read a newspaper and pronounce an entire article, letter to letter. Up to you. Following that, before I move on to the next part, anyone have any questions with phonetic alphabets?
Nope.
Cool. All right. Following that, there are four, between pages 61 and 62, there are 4 appointment titles in radio communications that you need to take note of. I only have 4 here. There's obviously a lot more, but I only put 4 here just for the basic things the fire team needs to know. Essentially, Sunray, he is the commander of the unit or the group that's being called. So essentially, I am a platoon commander and I have my radio operator manning my long range. My platoon might be, for example, platoon 1, but my radio operator, let's say platoon 2 wants to contact platoon 1 and he contacts platoon 1 through the long range radio, but my radio operator picks up on it. So platoon 2 is platoon commander. He will call using long range to platoon 1 and he'll ask for platoon 1 radio operator to fetch Sunray. So Sunray, if essentially means the commander of that subunit. Sunray can also be the fire team leader. If someone else is manning the fire team comms, Sunray can be the section commander. If someone is manning the section commander comms. So essentially, Sunray means just the head of that unit, head of that group of people. Following that, second command is Sunray Minor. So in the situation where the number 2 man for a fire team, he's Sunray Minor for that fire team. The medical unit, so the medic or combat lifesaver, the medic for the platoon or section will be known as Starlight. And the transport officer or personnel, so if anyone is on transportation of any kind, if you're the driver or you are the team that's in charge of Hammett transport, whatever, that call sign is playtime. There are more that I might add in the future to this manual, just as I update the manual, but those are the 4 that I see currently the most important at the moment. Following that, okay, before that, any questions on that?
Negative.
Okay, so following this part, there is the pro words. So pro words on page 62. Pro words are pronounceable words or phrases which have specific meaning to increase efficiency of handling messages on the radio circuits, or the it's a method in which things can be kept short and sharp. Yeah. So I'll just go very quickly over the pro words and the meanings of the pro words. In RATEL, there is over and there is out. Never do you use over and out in the same message, because over basically means I have completed my message and I expect a reply or response. Out means I've completed my transmission and I do not expect a reply or response. So if you use those two in conjunction in the same message, they contradict one another. When you say over, you expect a response, and when you say out, you don't. So those are the 2 meanings of the pro words.
Only the Yankees say that.
Yep. I spell, basically, for example, the Banco example that I use, I spell practically means I'm going to spell out a particular part of the transmission phonetically. And whenever you use I spell, so if, for example, I use the example I spell Banco, Bravo Alpha November Quebec Uniform Oscar Banco. So I essentially say Banco twice. I say Banco at the initial part of the spelling. I say Banco when I finish spelling it out. That is to facilitate the spelling process from start to end. Roger and copy, pretty much the same thing. I received and understood your last transmission. Grid. So if you say, if I have a message where I'm telling someone that I'm going to give a grid, if essentially my next transmission will be a grid reference. So I can say Alpha 1 is Alpha Actual, standby for grid reference, over. And then my next transmission will be a grid reference. Just on the side note, when saying that, whenever you ask a different call sign to stand by for a grid reference, or when you give a grid reference, always ask him to stand by for it. Make sure he replies by saying that he is ready to receive your grid reference before you say out your grid reference. I know, for example, those were there last night's Resistance game. A lot of the time, Alpha 3 was giving me a grid reference. I didn't have time to record it down because they were just giving it to me on the fly. Always ensure when you're giving a grid reference to say stand by for my grid reference, over. Then the next group will say this is, for example, Alpha Actual, send your grid reference, over. And that's when you send your grid reference. So they know that both parties are ready to send and receive the grid reference. That's just on a side note. Moving on to more pro words. The pro word say again means I did not understand your transmission. Say it again, basically. So never use repeat as a substitute to say again. And that's just for unless you're saying repeat your last. Essentially repeat.
Never say repeat, because that's
Yep.
pulling in the last artillery barrage.
Oh yes, that's
on the
right.
last position.
My bad. Yeah. So ADF
Always
standards.
say again.
Yep, always say again. Correct.
Brocky, please, is Brocky still here?
Yeah.
Please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right.
No,
You can use
yeah, you're right,
repeat
mate.
as a last barrow descent. Same as using words
Yep.
twice or say again.
Cool. All right. Following on Wilco. Wilco means I understand your transmission and I will comply to it. Very simple. It's like it's a very short form for yes, I'll carry out your orders basically. Comms check. This is we've done it quite a few times already. It is a transmission to make that you make to check the signal strength and readability of transmissions. A proper comms check will go something like this. If I say alpha 1, this is alpha actual, comms check over. Alpha actual will say this is alpha 1, I read you strength 5, readability 5. Or for short, I receive you 5 by 5 over. That is the proper way you reply to a comms check. When you say 5 by 5, the first 5 that you say represents strength, so how loud you hear it. The second 5 you say represents readability, so whether it's distorted or whether it's fuzzy, that is the second 5 that you use. If it's not full strength, it's not full readability, you'd say something like, I receive you 3 by 2. Does anyone have any questions on that? A little bit confusing, I know.
No.
Cool. All right. Essentially, when you do a comms check as well, it works both ways. So if I, alpha actual, ask for alpha 1 to do a comms check, and then alpha 1 says, alpha actual, this is alpha 1, I read you 5 by 5 over. Alpha actual will also help alpha 1 do a comms check by saying, this is alpha actual, alpha 1, I hear you 5 by 5, out. So both call signs are doing comms check for one another, even though only one person. Hang on, who's that? Yeah, someone's got a hot mic. Even though only one call sign requested the comms check, both call signs eventually does the comms check. Someone's got a hot mic, by the way.
It's Cody that keeps.
You
I don't
can't
have a hot
say
mic.
what? You
I don't even have my
fucking
radio.
remember.
Alright, no worries. Very last pro word is nothing heard. That means the entire transmission has been missed or not received, and allows all net stations to know that the transmission was not received. For example, if I was alpha 2 and I was calling alpha 1, alpha 1 is alpha 2, and then I say message, blah blah blah, over, and then alpha 2 is waiting for alpha 1 to respond, they're waiting, and they hear no response from alpha 1, so alpha 2 says, this is alpha 2, nothing heard, out. And that is how you use nothing heard. It can work both ways. Alpha 1 can be expecting a reply from alpha 2, and if they hear nothing, they will say nothing heard, and then they'll say out. The reason why you need to out to that, the reason why people need to out to nothing heard is because they need to, oh my UAV ran out of battery. The reason why you would out to nothing heard is because if, let's say, a transmission is open for communication between two channels, and nothing is heard, that conversation needs to end such that the airwaves are free for other parties to use. And that is why it is very important to keep your messages short and sharp as well. Finally, the last piece of theory for RATEL is the basic format of a radio call or radio message. Very simply, as per the last page of the manual, it goes something like this. Call sign, this is call sign message end sign. So you would identify, the first call sign identifies the station being called. Then you say this is, then the second call sign identifies the station calling. Then they will say the message, and then they'll use the end sign, whether the end sign is over or whether the end sign is out. There are two other end signs that you can use. There is wait, and then there's wait out. Not a lot of people usually use wait. They just use wait out. Wait means that I am holding on to my transmission for a good 3 to 5 seconds. Wait out means I need a minute before I respond to your transmission. Then you end the transmission there, and you say out. So for example, alpha actual might be talking to alpha 1, and they might be asking for a sit rep. So alpha 1, this is alpha actual, sit rep over. Then alpha 1 will respond. Alpha actual, this is alpha 1, wait out. So alpha 1 needs to collect his thoughts. He needs to formulate his sit rep before he transmit over to alpha actual, so he called for a wait out. In which case he'll take a minute, and then he'll retransmit to alpha actual once he's ready. Does anyone understand that piece of theory there?
Yep.
Cool. All right. Does anyone need me to go through any more examples with RATEL? Just to clarify.
Nope.
If not, we can end the entire part B here.